How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Awesome. Well, we've known each other kind of through your daughter, who I graduated with at the same year of East Lyme High School, and then also your sister, Joanne. And it seems like you and your family have lots of ties and connections to the area.
Well, we've been here a long time, I guess. My parents moved to New London, and my dad in 1940, he was in the Coast Guard band, and then Mom and him got married in 1943. So they've been in New London for a long time and moved to East Lyme in 1960. So we've been around a while.
A couple of connections. And it's not the smallest of families either.
No, there were 7 of us. I'm the youngest of 7. So, and then we all had lots of kids, and so there's a bunch of us.
Nice. And how many would you say are still in the area or connected to the area?
Majority. We have a few that live in Chicago, Atlanta, Ohio, Oklahoma, but there's still at least maybe 50 of us in the Old Lyme, East Lyme area.
40 or 50?
Yeah.
I can't imagine family gatherings and things like that.
It's fun.
Can you get most of the people together?
We just did, unfortunately, for my brother's memorial, because he died of COVID in January, so my oldest brother. So we had, most of us were here for that a few weeks ago. So.
Oh, well, I guess it's a sad moment, but a good moment to get together with other people.
Absolutely. You need each other.
Definitely, especially in these tough, interesting times. And you were just saying that you're planning the ceremony for your graduation from high school around here.
Well, we're having a 40th reunion.
40th reunion.
Yeah, class of East Lyme, 82.
Wow.
So.
Do you think many of the people will still be around?
We usually get, I don't know, maybe 60 to 100 people when we have a big one. So we'll see. Okay.
And so you graduated from East Lyme High School, and then you started to pursue studies in pharmacy, I believe.
Yep. I went to the University of Connecticut School of Pharmacy. So worked in retail pharmacy for 27 years or so before finding out about medical marijuana and getting into that. So
how did that start? How did you get interested in that area?
I think it started out when I was a student. I worked at Flanders Pharmacy in East Lyme, and that was owned by Dorothy Houlihan, who was a female pharmacist, and she owned her own business. And I remember thinking I would love to own my own business, but at the time, in the late 80s, pharmacies were getting taken over by the chains, and so went to work for a chain pharmacy and worked that way for a long time. But then when medical marijuana passed in 2012 in Connecticut, I realized that was a chance to own my own business and to start something new. And after 27 years in retail, it was getting kind of old, time for a change. So I knew nothing about it. I had to learn. You want to do
something new.
Very new, and I knew nothing about it, but I had to learn.
And then also the whole realm of business too. I imagine there was a huge learning curve there.
Yeah. I mean, with being a pharmacy manager, you do a lot of the business side of things, just scheduling and inventory and things like that. So I had some experience in that regard. But
what were some of the early challenges you faced?
Well, with marijuana banking, because it's federally illegal, finding a bank that was willing to work with you and have your account and let you write checks.
Because what is it, that you can take debit cards, but you can't do credit cards because of the federal law?
Right. And the debit is what they call a cashless ATM. It's not a real debit transaction like most transactions at a store. You don't pay a fee. But we called it a cashless ATM. So the bank, your bank would think you're withdrawing money at an ATM machine somewhere, but you're actually making a purchase. So you do pay a fee. It was like a $3 fee or something for a transaction if you use your debit card at the dispensary. Okay.
And Connecticut was the first state to pass it in 2012?
No, we weren't the first medical state, but we were the first state to require that pharmacists dispense the drug, which that's what tipped me off, was like, oh, well, this will limit the amount of people maybe who are going into it and increase our chances of winning a license.
Oh, it was a hard-fought battle to get that license?
Well, you had to do an application, and it was a process. Our application probably ended up being about this thick, 200 pages or so, because the state gathered a lot of information about the applicants, and then they graded the applications based on your business plan, your marketing plan, your security plan, your experience with managing a pharmacy and that sort of thing. So they graded it, and at the time, in 2013, when we applied, I think there were 27 applicants, and they chose 6, and we were lucky to be
27.
One of the first 6 to open. Yeah.
Wow.
And we opened in Uncasville in 2014.
Okay. And what was the name of it? Thames
Valley
Relief?
Relief, yeah.
Okay, so up in Uncasville, and you're going for a little while. Was it right away? It kind of took off?
It was slow.
It was
slow at first. Yeah, I was kind of worried because at first I thought, you know, you see on the news like lines around the corner, people at dispensaries, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's going to be crazy. But it was actually, if we saw 6 or 10 people a day in the first few months, we were lucky.
6 or 10 a day?
Yeah, and now, you know, they probably see 400 a day.
Holy cow.
But so it took a while to grow. But
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of apprehension about marijuana in general, doctors maybe not wanting to recommend it for their patients and things like that.
Yeah, but I imagine, just as you said, that with the pharmacy background, you know more about pharmaceuticals and drugs. That must help alleviate some of those concerns.
Yeah, especially for interactions and things. But yeah, I did have to learn. I went to Colorado and visited dispensaries out there, tried to learn as much online as I could about the drug, and so it was a learning curve for me in the beginning, definitely. And I actually met patients who probably knew more about it than me, people who'd been using it for a long time. So, you know, I think we all learned from each other.
Yeah.
Because I would hear their feedback on products too, and dosing and things like that. So I learned a lot from getting information back from patients and be able to help the next person. Okay.
And then from 2014, it's kind of slow beginning. Did you face any backlash, you feel, from the community, a little bit from doctors?
No, we were really lucky. I mean, it took a little bit of time to find a town that was willing to allow us to operate. Some towns were very nervous, exactly. It had to go through zoning. So I did try some other towns before we landed in Uncasville.
Really? Did you try East Lyme?
No, only because I didn't feel there was a space that would be an acceptable place. You don't want to be too close to schools, churches, daycares, in neighborhoods. And so I didn't really feel I had a location there that I thought would be the best. I went for Norwich, New London at first because I just thought population-wise,
makes sense.
But when they all didn't want to kind of go there right away, they wanted to play a wait-and-see game of how the program unfolds. I ended up in Uncasville only because I was working at Rite Aid in Uncasville.
So you knew the area a little bit.
I knew a lot of the community, and the zoning person there was awesome. She was just like, yeah, you're fine. And so maybe it helped that they knew I'd been around town for a while.
You had the experience, 27 years in pharmacies.
Yep, and the location was right on 32, so I think it was easily accessible, but wasn't really in anybody's backyard. And so I think, I had no backlash from the town. It was great.
That's great.
Some people did. Some people in other towns definitely had
a
some
lot
problems.
Harder time. You heard a lot of stories, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yep.
And I thought it was interesting how you said some of the people maybe shared more with you that they were experiencing different things. And I imagine a lot of these people, they tried traditional pharmaceutical to alleviate their concerns, and then they found you and found medical marijuana.
Yep. I can't tell you how many people would come in and say, I've tried everything, this is my last resort, I'm in so much pain, or they just don't, or people with PTSD. I think PTSD and pain were the top 2 conditions that people were using the medical marijuana for. I mean, we certainly help people with all kinds of GI problems like Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, because marijuana is an anti-inflammatory. So it helps a lot of conditions, psoriasis, things that are due to inflammation. Yeah, definitely, finding the dose and the product that works, because everybody's different, and each product we had probably over 100 products on the menu to choose from. So we'd sit down with every new patient and have at least a half hour with them, kind of go over the strains, the products, make sure they understood what their choices were, and then start experimenting until you kind of find what worked.
And I understand that there were only a certain amount of conditions or medical things that allowed them to have the license.
Right. It started out with 11. I think we probably have closer to 30 conditions now.
Okay.
As time went on, the state approved more and more conditions for using medical marijuana.
So it's not something that, hey, they've been using it on the streets and they just want a license to get it from Thames Valley.
I'm sure there were some people that did that, but they did it through a doctor, and a doctor approved it. So.
Yeah.
But even if they were using it on the street, they could have been using it medically, because it does help so much with so many things, just even insomnia. I can't tell you how many people would come in and say, I just don't sleep at night.
Which is pretty important.
Yep. And it's amazing how sometimes such a low dose, a dose that wouldn't even make you high, but enough to help you sleep. It was amazing. The stories I've seen of people who would come in just crying, saying thank you. This has changed my life. It's really amazing.
It's really moving. It takes what you're doing, your work, to a whole new level, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Were you able to chronicle any of these stories?
I mean, in my brain. I mean, we definitely kept notes in the computer too. Yeah. Like every person would have a profile, just like in the regular pharmacy. In the software, you can put notes, you can put what they've tried, you keep a history, so you know what they tried. If they walk in and said, I got this last time, I don't remember what it was, you could look it up.
You could see.
Yeah, so we did keep records like that.
Okay. And I mean, I studied public health. I did a master's of public health at a school of psychology, and one of the big things for behavioral health, things like PTSD and these different areas, is there's no real silver bullet. That even for traditional, and maybe you can even add more to this, you probably know more than me, but even traditional drugs for PTSD and depression and things like that, there's no one thing. There's lots of experimentation. It could take months and months to even find that right drug.
Same thing. I definitely had patients who would get frustrated that, you know, things they're trying isn't making a difference, or I increased the dose and then I felt too uncomfortable or too high or whatever. So there was definitely, some people hit it on the first try, and then some people did have to take, you know, a few months, and some people gave up. This isn't for me, you know, so.
It depends on all the different people.
Absolutely.
So you go from 2014, you know, 6 to 10 people a day, to you just said about 400 people a day. That must have been a huge change.
Luckily, it was little by little.
Yeah.
And you know, we could add staff and kind of learned as we went and made adjustments with inventory and you know, just how we ran the place, how we did things. So, you know, it was, so we could keep things moving and not keep people waiting too long. After COVID, it got really tough because we couldn't have people sitting inside the lobby waiting. So that, where the lines got outside and people were waiting in line outside, and it got tougher. But when it was normal, we got a good flow going.
Yeah, I understood it was somewhat of a family affair inside.
Yes, so my niece Meredith was a pharmacist as well.
Okay.
So when I first decided to try this, I didn't want to do it alone. I was a scaredy cat. So I called her and said, hey, do you want to try to apply for this license with me? So we did it together. And family investing, you know, my sisters and my parents and everybody helped us get off the ground.
The family all kind of came together.
Drained our 401ks and yeah. And
what did you do to make them really believe that this might work? Because it was an unknown, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you had some evidence from other states of what's, you know, what's been going on, but the family, even my parents who were in their late 80s at the time, were very supportive. I was surprised in a way that they weren't going to be like, what are you doing? Because if anyone had ever told me, you know, 20 years ago I'd be selling marijuana, I would tell them they're crazy.
It's funny how things change.
Yep.
Because some people have said, you know, this isn't your grandfather's marijuana back in the day.
It is stronger.
It is stronger.
Yeah.
But even your parents, who were in their 80s or so, still thought it was a great idea to support you.
Yeah. And so we ended up with, I think I ended up with at least 3 nieces, several great nieces working for us. My kids, each one of my kids did a turn there at some point.
Lots of learning.
Yeah, so it was a family affair.
Were there any things that you kind of wish maybe you weren't working with family, different arguments or disagreements?
You know, in the end, we would argue about something or a decision that was made and not like it or something. But you know, in the end, we love each other. I think we just have too much love for anyone to hold a grudge or be too upset for too long. And you know, some people did say, "Oh no, don't work with family," and yeah, nothing will ever ruin that. Nothing will ever ruin the family. So
that's great. I mean, the strong
nothing's
family love. Yeah, nothing's worth it. And you do know about all these different family companies that have done extremely well, and families maybe even get stronger through these experiences.
Yeah, well, at least I got to spend a lot of time with my kids. You know, I got to be with them throughout their workday, which was fun.
Yeah, and I'm sure they learned a ton from you, and it's a different kind of relationship to have that grow.
Yeah. Did
you see any things when you're growing during this time, things that weren't working that you had to fix as soon as possible?
Nothing that stands out like crazy. You know, there were always challenges with, you know, regulations and making sure we're following regulations. And, you know, as there was a period of time where we got short of product. Growers weren't producing as much as we'd hoped. As the program grew, the producers weren't keeping up. So there were times where there were product shortages.
So you didn't even have enough product to sell.
Sometimes, you know, for a little while there, it got rough. They've definitely grown. They've expanded their space, so they've moved to bigger places, and so the grows are definitely expanding and and I don't think there's shortages anymore. But there was a little period of time where we had some trouble and we had to, you know, well, this product worked for you, but we don't have it, so we got to find you something else, and it got tough there sometimes with that.
Okay. And was there any kind of rule that the growers had to be inside the state?
Absolutely, yes, because
Okay.
it's federally illegal. You can't cross state lines
Can't
with the
cross
product.
state lines.
So yeah, it's state licensed 4 grow facilities who produced all the products for the program.
Gotcha.
And they would deliver to us twice a week. So each grower, twice a week, we'd get 8 deliveries a week of products.
So I imagine from the growers to the dispensaries to different areas, it probably created a nice economic impact in the state.
I think so, and obviously recreational marijuana is going to make an even bigger difference there. Job creation and tax money coming into the state, tax money into the towns.
Yep.
Because in this new bill, any town that hosts a dispensary will get 3% of the tax revenue.
Every town will, so it's even good for the local town as well.
Yep. Yep.
Wow.
So,
and that's slated to start in 2022,
they
maybe?
say that. I think nothing ever goes the way it's planned.
Yeah,
and
just
life. To get the program up and running, you figure a grower, first they have to put out applications. Then the state has to they're doing a lottery for licenses. So if you win the lottery, then you can start to look for your building, look for your zoning, build out your building, get the electricity, the humidity controls, the security systems put in. By the time they do all of that, probably a year's passed, then they got to grow and they got to produce. So it's really, I think, 12 to 18 months is about right for getting a grow up and running. Yeah. And so for them, they haven't even put applications out yet from the state for this new program. Okay. So the growers that are operating now will be able to produce products for recreational. So by the end of 2022, they may have ramped up enough for the existing dispensaries that are working now can convert their licenses to sell both medical and recreational. So there may be some product available toward the end of 2022, but to really get going, I think it might be a little longer.
Have you been able?
Prediction.
Yeah, we have to be patient with everything in life, I guess. But have you been able to go see some of these different facilities where they grow?
I did go to a couple grows and got some tours. It's really neat.
Yeah, I mean, it's all hydroponically grown?
3 are hydroponic. 1 does grow in soil in Connecticut. But just the measures they take for keeping it clean. Like we had to go. They put you into scrubs, so you had to get out of your street clothes. You go into this air shower, they called it, where they blow you with this high velocity air to get any contamination off of you before you go into where the plants are. So it's really the measures they take to keep the plants healthy, keep them from getting infested with anything, because everything's an indoor grow. It's really amazing what they do. Very high tech.
Yeah, I'm sure. Those air showers remind me of factories I've been in Asia. Before you go in, you have to go through the air shower as well.
Yep.
And I understand that's one of the main reasons, or one of the big reasons to use medical marijuana from these growers is on the streets, it's very absorbent and can absorb all these toxins that people then inhale.
It could be pesticides you're inhaling, eating, And it could be laced with something. That's the scary part. And that's, when people say, oh, I don't mind medical marijuana, but recreational really worries me. My answer to that is it's out there already. I mean, the one thing that surprised me the most is when I sat down with new patients and they would tell me, I've been smoking since the 60s or whatever. I was amazed how I was so naive about how widespread marijuana use is that, so it's out there, but don't you want to give consumers a safe lab-tested product where you know the strength, you know what's in it, you can decide how much to take and you know what you're getting, rather than getting something off the street. It's a safety issue for me. There have been people who think they're getting marijuana and it's laced with fentanyl, and that's pretty scary. Yeah,
especially with your pharmacy background. And right now, are you still at Thames Valley?
I'm not. So I sold the company in 2019. And what's happening with cannabis in Connecticut is what happened with pharmacies back in the 70s and the 80s. Big corporations, multi-state operators are coming in and they're buying up the little guys and they're setting up these big corporate companies. And it's not that I ever intended to sell. My heart is still there. I think it's like almost like having a baby and watching it grow, then handing it over to somebody to raise the rest of the way, like giving your kid up for adoption.
Like any entrepreneur, you kind of see that.
I did, but it was a matter of, there was a lot of uncertainty in the market. We knew another competitor was coming into Groton. Curaleaf was opening a store in Groton. We knew recreational was probably coming. Were they going to let the medical dispensaries have recreational licenses or not, because if they didn't, we knew we would probably lose business. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And then there was the, obviously a decent amount of money that was offered that it was like, what's the better deal? Hard to know. But they offered us, they offered me a 2-year employment contract. So I worked and managed the place for them for 2 years. They offered everybody, I got them to make a deal, to kind of keep things as far as staff the same. So I felt good about the deal at the time. When my 2 years was up, they brought their own manager in, made me feel bad. So I had to go. So I'm sort of retired, but waiting for the next thing. So I am hoping to do recreational when it comes about.
Okay, so you're making plans for that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, one thing is also that you're quite involved in the community outside of everything you're doing with your pharmacy background. I believe you're a coach at the high school?
I am. I've been coaching girls tennis since the mid-90s. And that's a lot of fun. It's probably been 17 years or so. Maybe I'm off on my timing, but tennis was what I loved in high school, and to be able to go back and to be able to do that, it's so much fun. And
I'm sure coaching that many years, you have athletes coming back. You probably stay in touch with a bunch of them.
Yeah, it's fun to see them on LinkedIn and see what they're doing now.
Yeah, definitely. And I see you out on the courts all the time, and you got
I'm
one of the
still
best
out there.
forehands out there. So.
I try.
Yeah. And what do you think moving ahead for some of the recreational? What are kind of your big visions or thoughts, goals?
Yeah, so the thing that worries me the most is it's going to be a lottery. So whether we win a license or not, it's going to be totally a matter of chance. But we're going to try. I purchased a building in East Lyme in a light industrial zone, and we're going to have a public hearing in October about getting zoning approved for that. So I did that on a kind of a wing and a prayer that we win a license. But if I don't, I suppose I could rent it to someone who does. If we get the zoning all lined up. But I just know how time consuming that is, so I wanted to do as much ahead of time as I could. The state hasn't put applications out yet. I'll apply for, in the lottery. I'll apply. Some of my kids with experience will apply. We'll see what happens. Hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah. Are there requirements or restrictions who can apply?
We don't know that yet. The state hasn't put any guidelines out. They haven't written the regulations yet. They haven't put the application information out yet. So it's all a waiting game.
And then for the October meeting for zoning, I imagine there's lots of documents and things you need to prepare.
Yeah, I hired an attorney to write a zoning regulation that would make sense for the town, because I don't want to upset anybody in the town that I love. So, but I would like the town to have that 3% tax revenue, because that could be a lot of money into the town.
Definitely could help education, could help many different things.
Yeah. So, being in a light industrial zone, it's not in a neighborhood, it's not near any of the schools. It's so I'm hoping that it'll be acceptable.
That's great. Really exciting. Fingers crossed that something works well on that. That'd be awesome. And I wonder your thoughts. I'm really curious in terms of the marijuana usage, whether it's medical or now getting past as recreational, and the connection potentially to COVID and this pandemic that we're going through.
Well, as far as having a lot of people in one place, we would certainly. At the dispensary even now, they take measures to keep only a certain number of people in the dispensary at a time and that sort of thing. I don't know if smoking, just like smoking tobacco, smoking marijuana might make you more susceptible to lung disease. So that's where, that can get tricky, I would imagine, and put people more at risk for catching COVID. That's a worry. But hopefully people are smart and they take all the right precautions.
Or maybe
it hit pretty close to home for me with my brother, so it's definitely something I worry about.
Yeah. Do you have any idea how he contracted it? Well,
he was definitely compromised. He'd had a stroke. He had been a smoker his whole life. He had heart disease, and he was 74. So, he lived in Oklahoma, so I wasn't around every day to know how exposed he got, but he got it somewhere. And he was definitely compromised.
And that was before the vaccine?
It was in January, right. So they were just starting rollouts of the vaccine, but he just caught it before they were widely available.
Yeah, it's so tough to know. Even with this Delta variant and what are the real numbers? I know this week New York Times had something, they said the breakthrough rate's maybe 1 in 5,000 if you have the vaccine. But then I don't know if you saw 2 days ago in the New London Day that there was a breakout of over 100 cases at Connecticut College here.
Yeah, I did hear that, yeah. And those kids were vaccinated, I believe.
They were vaccinated. Supposedly, according to their records, there's about 15 students that were not vaccinated. But then even with that, there's over 100 right now active cases on campus. So, I mean, what happened there? Where's the discrepancy?
Well, we just hope it's not as serious because they were vaccinated. That's what we can hope.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, that's fingers crossed. And then right away, of course, they go remote. And we're seeing all these new adaptations that we have to make. Is there something that you've kind of changed in your life because of COVID that you can think of?
I mean, just like everybody else, you know, try to mask up when you're going to be around people in the grocery store and things like that. I mean, once there was that short period of time where you didn't have to wear your mask if you were vaccinated, but that ended pretty quickly. So no, I'm very careful. I don't, you know, it's not worth it. Some things are more important than others, and looking out for everybody is the most important thing. Especially
with the personal experience that you've had, and I wonder, with the high levels of anxiety and people really stressed with this, potentially some of the medical marijuana or the recreational down the road might be able to help them get through it. Yeah, I mean, it definitely, even when it's recreational, I think a lot of people will still be using it for medical reasons. You know, the people with insomnia, the people with anxiety, you know, who just didn't go to the trouble to get a medical card because may not have had one of those conditions officially that it's approved for. So I think even though it's recreational, a lot of people do use it for those benefits. Gotcha. And kind of moving forward, if people want to know more about you or try and get involved in this burgeoning new industry, how might they potentially get in contact with you or know more about you? I'm on LinkedIn, I guess, and Facebook. But the state has a website just for the cannabis, for the recreational cannabis. Okay. So if you go to the Department of Consumer Protection website, the Department of Consumer Protection regulates the medical program and will be regulating the recreational program. They have set up a special site just for recreational marijuana with information. So when they release any information, they have like a press release spot where you can look at what the latest is. When they put applications out, they'll be posting it there. So keeping people up to date on what's going on with the new law. That's great. And I think just a few days ago, there was a large Chamber of Commerce event regarding medical marijuana, recreational marijuana as well. Yep, I was there. Any takeaways from that you want to share? Not much, besides they haven't put anything out there yet. I was hoping to go and get some information. The commissioner of the Department of Consumer Protection was one of the speakers, and you know, she talked an overview of the law and things like that, just so people in the area, businesses too, could know what's going on. And my nephew Cate Zrenda is an attorney, and he was one of the speakers as well. And he kind of talked about, for employers, what they need to know as far as the new law goes. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Such a pleasure to have you.